Okay, welcome everyone to a new series that I'm starting on this channel called the Premier League Roundup. Now that is a working title, I may change that down the line, but at the moment it's called the Premier League Roundup, and the idea is it's going to be a sort of long form show every week where I take you guys through some of the main talking points and the main topic areas that have caught my eye from the past 7 days or so of Premier League action. Now, that also includes things like transfers, games, sort of any wider stories that have popped up around different teams and different players in the league. But yeah, just a sort of glimpse into the things that have caught my eye from the past week in the world of the Premier League. And it's a pretty interesting week to start it from a City fan's perspective, because we're going to cover, obviously, the Manchester derby and the fallout from that. The Matt Gay signing, which got announced yesterday at the time of recording, the state of Crystal Palace and what that kind of leaves them in after the news of Gay leaving and Oliver Glasner basically saying that he's already told them that he's not renewing, or pretty much saying that. And then a couple other points that I've noticed and just kind of what I'll touch on. But we're going to start with the Manchester derby, and we're going to start it from the City point of view, and we'll also look at it from the United point of view as well. But starting from the City point of view, that was probably, in my opinion, if not the worst, it could technically be the worst, but if not the worst, top 5 at least worst performances I've seen of the Guardiola era watching this City team. And I don't say that lightly. There's been some absolute clangers in there where we talk about the Champions League final in Porto, for example. That definitely ranks up there as well. But it really felt like there was so much missing from this team, and I'm not using excuses of injury or potential red card for Dalot after like 5 minutes. They're not excuses that can be used. The team was good enough and should have been good enough with the talent on there to win that game by, multiple goals. There's no excuses, especially when you compare the quality of the United team to the quality of the City team. There's no comparison, in my opinion. Now, some people may say that's controversial. I do think that the United team actually has more quality than people do give it credit for. I think they're just down tools when they're not happy with the current situation, like they haven't been with Amorim. But they were outfought. The effort wasn't there compared to United. Like, United's effort felt like 20-30% more. Just looked like very placid and very sort of passive in the game. There was no real like cutting edge to what they were doing. And it was really interesting to watch because I think everyone kind of had a bad performance. I don't think there was really, apart from Donnarumma, who definitely, deserved better on the day, and maybe Kusanov, who I felt was hanged out to dry a little bit from other defenders on the team, especially on that right-hand side with Rico Lewis, who just got tortured and torched all game. No one had a good performance, and you're talking big players, Doku, Foden, Rodri, Haaland, all looked so out of it, so just not involved. Some people said Rodri played well. For me, he looked so off it. What it really showed me is the lack of athleticism in that centre midfield area for City is going to really cost them again this season if they don't look at ways of sorting it out. Rodri, a pivot of Rodri and Bernardo, in my opinion, is not, for this season at least, going to get you anywhere over the line in any competition potentially. Now look, they're in the semi-final of the Carabao Cup, more than likely going to reach the final now after leading 2-0 in the second leg, going into the second leg, sorry. But it feels like just the City team have gone, let's say, 3 steps forward from last season, and then the past month have gone 2 steps back since the start of the season, and just kind of forgotten all the different bits that were making them quite successful when people thought they were going to have a bigger drop-off. I think a big miss, and I think something that people are overlooking, is the fact that Nico Gonzalez has been out injured since the start of the year and a bit in and out of the team and the sub-bench and the squad. I think his athleticism has been really missed, especially since Rodri's come back in. Rodri shouldn't be playing 90-minute games at the moment. He should be playing 60 minutes, then taken off. 40-minute cameos or 30-minute cameos, building that sort of, building that motor again that he had before he got injured. Because coming back from the injury he had, and then the secondary injury after that, is not easy thing to do for anybody. Any top class athlete struggles to get back from this injury to full fitness. So he needs time to build up his athleticism. Bernardo being in the middle. Now, I love Bernardo. Bernardo is a club legend. I don't say this lightly. I think he's one of the top 10 greatest players to ever play for City. Maybe even scratching the top 5. But he should be used sparingly. He shouldn't be used game in and game out. And I think at the start of the season, you saw he looked fresh, he was active, and he will run and he will die for that badge. But he's getting flogged. He's getting absolutely flogged to within an inch of his energy, where you can just see that he's absolutely gassed out there. And that central area was dominated by the United players. Mainu and Fernandes ran circles around those two. Honestly, it was like a fever dream watching it. It was so strange to watch because it's so rare where you feel like you see that. And you saw it a lot last season with the Man City midfield getting overrun a lot by a lot of different teams. And it feels like we were stopping that at the start of the season from the City's perspective. City was stopping that at the start of the season, and now suddenly it's gone back to the norm. I think that a big issue is because Nico Gonzalez has been injured. I think he offers a lot of bite, a lot of physicality. He has the pace and the agility to get to players, even if it's to foul them or get a foot in or just break up the play or intercept. He's got that energy and that motor to get there. On the ball, no one can compare to Rodri. Rodri's one of the best in the world and one of the best to ever do it on the ball in the central midfield in that 6th position. But Nico Gonzalez offers you such great athleticism, strength, obviously physicality, height as well, which is really important in this modern day Premier League. The Premier League has moved away from sort of that smaller, more technical player to more physical, dominant players. I think there will be a reaction and a switch back to maybe more technical players eventually, but I do think the current future of the Premier League is going to a more physical route. And I do think a Bernardo and Rodri midfield is going to struggle especially until Rodri gets back to full fitness, which can take a long, long time. He's not been playing for a long, long time now. But it really did feel like that's where the game was won and lost in a lot of respects, with Mainu and Fernandes just completely dictating the whole of the play. Haaland was basically non-existent in the game, but my thing is with Haaland, if he's not getting the service, you can't really blame him for not being involved in the game. Now, yes, I do think he should be sticking his body on people sometimes. He gets out-muscled a lot, and I think a lot of that is down to fatigue. He's not putting himself about as much, and you can just tell he looks absolutely zapped of energy as well. And I think a lot of blame on that for this squad has to be put on Pep Guardiola, because that sort of period before Christmas when the team wasn't getting rotated and we were playing the same team lineup, same 11 week in, week out, I think that's come back to bite City a little bit in the backside. And I think what's going to be interesting to see now, they've got a lot of injuries. City. It's not an excuse, they've got a big squad and they have a great academy, so they should be able to push through it. And they've also reinforced during the January window with Semenyo and now Mark Gay. So it's not an excuse. They should deal with this situation, get people back fit. But I think it's going to be really interesting to see how they cope now with injuries to key players. They have just got Marmoush back. So hopefully Haaland can start getting a rest from City's perspective. Pep Guardiola probably really happy that he's going to be able to take Haaland out for a few games. Ideally, I would drop Haaland for the next couple of games. So the Champions League game, and then during the week, and then the game against Wolves at the weekend. I'd be starting Marmoush. If he does play in the Champions League, because Marmoush just got back, then Marmoush has to play against Wolves. Has to play against Wolves. I think Núñez was a huge miss in the game. That right back spot. I love Rico Lewis. I think Rico Lewis got so much talent. But from my perspective, from a squad building perspective, how I feel about squad building, you can have one player in the team potentially who's in this current Premier League, you can have one player in the starting 11 who is potentially not physically able to match the high standards and the high physicality rate of the league at the moment. but having more than one in your team, and especially one that's in your back line, in your defence, is going to really cost you. And City have a couple in there. You know, Cherky's not a real battler. Foden, physicality-wise, he's getting pushed off the ball so easy. And then you have Rico Lewis as well. And Bernardo, that's too many. You can maybe get away with two. You know, not every player has to be a physical specimen. You know, you do need your technical players. But I think having them in the back line, especially at right back, and I think United did, I mean, to be fair to Carrick, I think he pulled a blinder putting Dargu on that wing. Someone who is a physical specimen. Was a great bit of management, a great bit of tactical play. Núñez was a huge miss, and it's crazy to think that. It's crazy to think that where we were this time, maybe last year, or, you know, maybe like November 2024, where I think most City fans would have been happy to never have seen Núñez put on the shirt again. To see him now become an integral part of this team, it's crazy to think that, but he is. So him missing out because of a flu is really, you know, was really damaging. But again, that's no excuse. There's no excuse. That game should have been 4-5, 6-0. 2-0 was flattering to City. It really was. How they get past this? Well, from a City perspective, I think they need to get the players back. Again, injuries shouldn't be an excuse. You have a big squad. You spent a lot of money. You need to get your players back. I think we need to manage the minutes a lot better. Pep Guardiola needs to do a better job of managing minutes, bringing people in at the right times, you know, rotating better. I feel like he's got away from the rotations that he used to be so good at the early part of his City career. I feel like he's lost the trust of a lot of these players, and sometimes you just need to trust them. You need to have blind faith sometimes, I feel like, in management. From my experience coaching at a high level in basketball, sometimes you just got to try stuff. You got to put players in, throw them into the fire, see what happens. I'm not comparing my ability to Pep Guardiola for 1 second, but from my experience watching and learning and listening to coaches, sometimes you just got to try stuff. And I feel like he's become a bit more reluctant to try things as his City's career has gone on. So I think there needs to be a better management of minutes. I think we need to get more athleticism in that middle. And really just focus the team on getting Haaland service. I think one thing that would really help is making sure Cherky is in the middle of the pitch. And I think Foden should be playing more wide. I've said this before in other videos. My favourite version of Phil Foden is the one that's closer to the striker, the second forward, the inside forward. And I think the best way to do that would be getting him on that right-hand side, closer to Haaland. On the left, you have Semenyo or Doku, whichever one. For me, it would be Semenyo. I would put Semenyo on the wing. And you should really focus on... Cherky should be the one linking the midfield to the attacking lineup. There's too much of a gap at the moment. Bernardo can't do it. Bernardo's not really a creative player anymore in that sense. He was maybe when he was younger, but now he's more of a motor, an engine, sort of a person who keeps the ball ticking over. There needs to be somebody who connects that sort of midfield. Rodri can do it, but he then has the job of sitting and chasing after people. It's not going to happen. So you need Cherky in the middle, I think, to be able to conduct the play. Your defence needs to get tighter. Again, I think that comes with getting people back from injury. As much as a bit of a cop-out, it is true. They've got, you know, John Stones is out injured. Ake's on one leg. He's trying, but he's on one leg. He can only do so much. He's taking pain injections apparently every game at the moment, so that's not great. And then, you know, Diaz is out. Gvardiol's out for the year. So I think Gay coming in is going to be a huge help. A huge help. And apparently his injury record's great. Apparently in the past 5 years he's had like a couple of small little niggling injuries. Now, from City's current record of injuries, that doesn't fill me with too much confidence because as well, our team just seems to be plagued with them all the time. As soon as you come to City, you suddenly seem to get injured left, right and centre. But hopefully he can keep fit as well. Him and Kusanov can form a relationship. Max Allain can come in maybe as and when needed to give, you know, either of them a rest. And then get Núñez back fully fit at right back. And then you've also got that option there. I think that's a big thing as well, getting that defence organised. Now, it'll be interesting to see what happens. I think the title's probably over. And we'll touch on Arsenal maybe later on in the video, but I do think the title's probably over at the moment for City. I think they should focus really on the performances, not the results at the moment. Improve the performances, results will come. And I think in the cup competition, especially like the Champions League later down the line, you want better performances because that's how you're going to beat the bigger teams. So 15 minutes on City there. We'll touch on United quickly because, it takes two to tango, and United did batter City, as much as I hate to say it. But you know what it is? I was really annoyed on the day after watching the game, but, when you get well and truly beaten, sometimes for me, I lose that annoyance, after a little bit. Obviously, still wish it didn't happen, but I can almost go, we were just, hold your hands up. They absolutely destroyed us. Nothing we could have done. Talking to friends who are United fans, same thing I've said to them. Look, it should have been 4-5, 6-0, maybe even 7 or 8. Some people are saying it is what it is. So I think tactically, Carrick got it spot on. The way I was really impressed with their defensive structure off the ball and their off the ball work. The way they isolated the young lad Max at centre back, and just sort of let him have the ball, and then made it so all the passing lanes were kind of blocked off, with Mbeumo, Dorgu and Fernandes kind of forming a sort of, and Ahmad as well, forming a sort of barrier for no passes to kind of get into Rodri, where that's where City obviously want to dictate play, which then made Bernardo have to basically come and get it off Donnarumma's feet to actually get hold of the ball. That was brilliant defensive structure. I think there was a great little switch as well, sort of early through the first half when Dalot got his yellow card. They saw that he was obviously getting isolated in the first couple of plays by Doku. So what would happen is Ahmad would make the extra effort, come back and double up on that side. So Dalot didn't have to make the recovery runs out. And then when he did, he obviously had fresher legs to be able to manage that. And I really felt they got all these different sort of defensive structures spot on. To the point where someone like even Casemiro, who can be a bit of a liability at times because of his age and his athleticism and his decline sort of physically, where he's not even exposed. They had so much support around him, with Mainu being an absolute engine in the middle. And I mean, Amarin got it so wrong with Mainu. So wrong. The boy has talent, and, as much as I hate to give credit to those on the red side of Manchester, Mainu is a quality player, and he should be in the England team. He's an engine in the midfield, something City lacked. And the way he was just literally here, there and everywhere was so impressive. He obviously had a point to prove. So my only caveat to that whole performance of United is we've seen this before. We've seen the new manager bounce a few times with United now. There's no reason to think that it's going to be like this, from now till the end of the season. More than likely, there'll probably be a big crash down to earth at some point, because that's what happens with these United teams. They get an early bounce, everything's all hunky-dory, and then bam, suddenly all, heads are down, whatever reason. And I do think Carrick is not the solution. Yes, he did, in fair play to him, he did outmanage Pep in this game in isolation, but I don't think that's a thing that's going to continue. I do think they need to look at what manager they're going to bring in next. They need to bring in someone with authority. They need to bring someone in who's got a great tactical mind. I do think they have a quality squad. As much as people like to bash on that quality of that squad, I don't think it's actually as bad as people make out. They have talent. And look, they may lose Fernandes in the summer. I could see that being a possibility. Maybe not as much now. But depending on how the rest of the season goes, if it doesn't go great, and there's a long way to go now between now and the end of the season, if it doesn't go great, if they lose Fernandes, that's going to be a gaping hole in their team. He has been the one person who's sort of kept the engine going, even when times are tough. So I think they need to sort of try and finish strong and get the management appointment right. And again, we've said this over and over again. We've been here before with United. And from a Man City fan perspective, obviously I hope that doesn't happen. I hope they get it wrong. But I think a lot sort of tilts on that now. It was really interesting to see him go back to a back four and see the improvement straight away. Their squad just evidently fits a back four better. The players they have and the structure. Sometimes I think managers overcomplicate, and I include Pep in this. I'm a big believer in any sort of sport, keep things simple. You don't need to overcomplicate things. Yes, you can have tactical switches here and there about different things that you're going to do, different variations of how you're going to play. But I really do think the principles of any sport are very simple. And if you get those simple foundations right, no matter what sport you're playing, you give yourself a chance at winning. And I think that's what they did at the weekend. They just kept it simple. They got the principles right. They got simple things they did simple things correctly. They did it better than City as well, which then resulted in obviously the performance that you got. I don't think sport's that much more complicated. If you run harder, if you work harder, if you look after the ball and make simple passes, good passes, and you do them quickly, and then when you get the chance to take your opportunities, that's the game of football. It doesn't have to get much more complicated than that. Strong defensive structure, attack with pace, attack with sort of confidence, make key passes. That's what they did. They didn't dwell on the ball. They didn't sort of be placid with it. They didn't meander on it. They got the ball and they played it straight away. If they get that right, they could have a strong end to the season. But we'll see. I feel like we have been here before, and we'll see what happens as we go along. I think you've got to give it another few more games before you can make a judgment on this team and how they're going to finish the season. But in fairness, as much as I hate to say it, they were really good. They played really well that day. Do I think it's going to continue long term? No. But was it very impressive for game one by Carrick? Yes, of course. He's just outclassed probably in my opinion, the best manager to ever live. So that does come with some credit in the back. That does come, fair play on that one. Again though, let's see how long it lasts. Let's see where we go from here. Now, moving on, we have the Mark Gay signing. So that was announced yesterday at the time of recording. So I'm recording this on Tuesday. This was announced on Monday. But we all kind of knew Friday that this was kind of a done deal. Medical was booked on Sunday. He's come in and he's now signed for City officially. Watched the interview with him. He comes across as a really humble, hard-working guy. Been really impressed, obviously, with his, like most people, with his improvement. I think him on the Euros a couple of years ago was a big eye-opener to the quality he had. And look, you can debate Gareth Southgate's sort of ability as a manager till, the cows come home, but him bringing Gay into that side made a huge difference in a time where the team really needed a new centre-back to come forward and take over from the old guard of Maguire and John Stones. Now, I know John Stones partnered with him, but obviously John Stones is now on the latter end of his career. And I think Gay is such an amazing signing for City because he comes in as we were about to see John Stones and Ake leave probably in the summer. It's highly unlikely that both of them are going to get contract extensions at this point from everything that's sort of in the press. I think their injury record is kind of sealing a deal on that one. And I love John Stones. John Stones is one of my favourite players to ever play for City. So for me, that's, I hate that. I hate that he probably is done at the end of the season, but it is what it is. I think Matt Gay coming in is the timing's perfect. The timing is perfect. Now, I think he's more of an all-rounder, Matt Gay. I don't think he necessarily excels in like one particular area, but I do think overall his game is so well-rounded that I think he's going to slot into that back line instantly. And with Guardiola out till the end of the year, I can really see Matt Gay cementing a starting spot within this City team. And I'm really intrigued to see how the partnership between him and Kusanov develops because Guardiola's injury is a nasty one. It's a long injury, so it's going to take him a while to get back. And I think when he gets back, a couple of people suggested, this might open him up to play left back again. I prefer Guardiola at centre back. I like my left backs being left backs, but Nico O'Reilly's played amazing there. I really want to see Aiden more at left back for Man City. I really want to see how he develops as a left back because I think having him and Nunes on those wings, bombing up and down, the creativity of those two as your wing backs would be amazing. But I think Matt Gay's going to bring athleticism. He's going to allow maybe Guardiola to become more of a left back and left centre back sort of option. And it just it gives more options either way for Guardiola or whoever the manager might be. It gives them more options over the next few years about how they might want to structure the defensive lineup. I think he's a leader, obviously. He comes with, leading Palace to the FA Cup glory last year. And I think all the experience he's gained from England international duty is going to help him when it comes to making that jump to Champions League football, which he's never played in before. I think he's also a bit more of a goal threat as well. Like, I don't think, apart from Gvardiol and Ake back in the day, people forget Ake was a real threat from corners. His jumping ability was incredible. He used to get to so many different headers. And for potentially the lack of game time he's probably had over the years because of injuries and being in and out of the team, he's been a threat on corners and he's always been great in the air. So losing someone like him and not really having anyone else on the back line who's that good at, attacking corners, for example, or defending in the air, I think him coming in is a great improvement on that area for City, because one thing City don't have at the moment is, they've scored a few more this year from corners, but set-piece taking and set-piece goals are non-existent sometimes from this team, and especially recently. You see how, a lot of teams are moving to focusing on these sort of areas of the game, like corners and free kicks and throw-ins, where these dead ball situations where they can create advantageous sort of situations, and there's been more of a focus on sort of tactical movement in these areas. Take almost inspiration from basketball and set plays in basketball, where I think City are kind of behind on the 8 ball on that. We don't have great headers of the ball. We don't have great people in the air in set pieces, I find sometimes. So having someone like Mark Gay, who I believe is a much better threat in the air than the rest of the back line, especially at City at the moment, is going to hopefully, raise the ceiling a little bit of that. And I think he's going to be a great signing. I mean, for 20 million, look, you can debate the wages all you want, but if we sign him for, let's say 75 million pound worth, probably. For the quality of defender he is in this current market, he's probably worth about 75 million. If you bought him for 75 million and paid him 200k, you still end up spending more money on him than we are doing now over the length of his contract. So wages don't bother me. As long as the club have got the books in order, I don't care. That is what it is. Wages don't bother. For 20 million price up front, steal. Absolute steal. One of the best defenders in the league. Prime age, ready to take the jump to world-class level. I can't see this not working out. I really can't. And I'm really intrigued to see how things go from here with him. And he's obviously he's going to have a run in the side now till the end of the season. It's going to be great to watch him in the Champions League. And I think that's only going to help England as well. The experience he gets from playing at this elite level now is only going to help him at England level. So looking forward to the World Cup. That's obviously going to be hopefully a net positive at the end of the day. But I think what a great bit of business from City. And I'm very excited to see how he changes that back line, especially with the Vardy being out and Diaz having a lot of injury problems. I think there's nothing but positive thoughts I have on this situation. Now, where does this leave Crystal Palace, for example? I think just segueing across to that, really unfortunate situation for them. The good thing for them is with this signing, they get 20 million instead of losing him on a free. So they can at least reinvest that into the squad, getting a replacement in early doors. They've still got plenty of time in January. They've still got, a third of the transfer window open. So you expect them to replace Gay at some point within the next few days. So on that note, positive. Obviously, bad note. He's their captain, he's their leader, he's been a talisman for that club. His improvement has been the reason, one of the main reasons Palace have obviously climbed the table that they have, along with other sort of mitigating circumstances, which we'll talk about in a mo. So having to replace him is difficult. But I think the thing that's going to sort of hurt Crystal Palace the most, and I think everyone will agree, is the fact that Glasner has announced this week that he's not renewing his contract at Palace. So his contract's up in the summer. He's not going to renew. And I think that's a huge, huge hammer blow to Palace and their ambitions to grow as a club. I think it's really unfortunate because he was obviously doing such good things there, and evidently there's something that's just not quite right that's made him not want to renew. But it's really unfortunate because I think he's such a great manager. And to lose him out of the league, potentially, because, I think he could get any job in Europe at this point with the job he's done at Palace. It would be a real shame to lose a manager of his quality. I really like what he's about. I really like how he sets his team up. I think he's tactically able to adjust things, which is really, really impressive, especially with a team, a mid-table team, or a team when he came in that was fighting relegation, to be able to put them into situations that, they would not just fight teams at home, but outplay them a lot of the time as well. Incredibly impressive, adaptable manager, speaks very well. And I think it's just a real shame that it looks like something's gone on there behind the scenes that means that he just doesn't feel confident in signing a contract extension. And the hit that's going to have on Palace, I think, is going to be one that they're going to struggle to recover from for a couple of years. Again, like anything, when a manager leaves, it's really important to think about who comes in. And until we know who's going to come in, you can't really fully judge that. But I just think the quality that he brought to that team, the way he would set his teams up, the sort of style of play that they had, making Selhurst Park a absolute fortress again for any team to go there, it's going to be hard for them to kind of recover and bounce back from that. And then you also have the fact that Mateta apparently has expressed interest in leaving. Apparently he wanted to leave in the summer to improve his chances of getting into the French national team for the World Cup. And apparently those rumours have surfaced again that he is looking to move out of the club again. Not hit the heights of play that he reached last season. I think I think he's had some injuries, so I do think that's probably maybe, impacted those things. But I could see why, ambition-wise, he's probably going to look to try and get to a big club, maybe in Europe. I think he could be a starting striker for most of the teams in the league. I think he's probably better than Sesko, definitely better than Gyökeres at Arsenal. I think Chelsea don't really apart from Liam Delap, don't really have a striker. And I think on sort of history, Mateta is better than Liam Delap. And Tottenham could, again, Tottenham, if you count them as a big team, one of the bigger teams. Villa, Watkins, that's an interesting one. Maybe that's a bit more up for debate. Obviously, City have Haaland, so that's probably a no-go. But I think if you look into Europe, a lot of teams could do with a striker of his quality, which would set him up better for, obviously, that French national team spot that he probably wants. So I feel sorry for them. I feel sorry for the Crystal Palace fans. They've always had a great run. And they're still in, obviously, the Conference League. They're not doing probably as good as they hoped, but they are still in it. And I think they've got a long road ahead of recovery after these situations play themselves out. As with anything, when people leave, it's all about who you bring in. If they replace well and recruit well, maybe they'll carry on in the situation they're in, the sort of the vein they're in. But with Glasner in charge and the team they had, they were looking at probably multiple years in European football. But football moves so quick. To think only 7-8 months ago, or whatever it was, they were winning the FA Cup, lifting the FA Cup, winning the first trophy in their history, to now being in this situation at the start of 2026. It just shows you how quick football can change. And that FA Cup win, I'm sure Palace fans would never trade that for anything. They're probably still on cloud 9 about it. Probably the best day that they've had out supporting their team, which is incredible. But it is interesting how winning that has now led almost potentially to this situation that they're in now. So we'll see how they get on. We'll see how they change as they go along. I think, again, potentially a long road ahead for them to recover from this. All right, moving on to the last couple of points I want to bring up from this Premier League this week is we're looking at the Tottenham game. So West Ham beat Tottenham with a last-minute goal, and the state of Tottenham really as well, looking at where they are, Tottenham are struggling. So if we look at the table, the Premier League table, they are currently 14th. Recent form was a win, draw, and then 2 losses in a row recently. They've only got 27 points from their 22 games. And Thomas Frank is struggling to get a tune out of this team. Now, I think Thomas Frank is a great manager. I think given time, he would get it right. But how much time can Tottenham afford to give him? Having the situation last season, now yes, they're in Champions League this year, but it's highly unlikely they're not doing great in the Champions League. I think they're like 12th in the Champions League table. There's a chance after this round of fixtures that they'll be confirmed they won't be able to make the top 8. So it means they'll have to play a playoff game against somebody else, which is never easy. If they miss out on Champions League, if they don't go far in this competition and then miss out on Champions League football, which they're more than likely 100% going to do, I think it's pretty nailed on that they're not going to make Champions League spots this year. Even if they miss out on Europe altogether, that's a huge hit on the salary, on the sort of spreadsheets, on the money from the money men. And I think Tottenham can't afford that. They could still make Europe, they could still make Europa League or Conference League. But I think the money men upstairs are going to be worried about that. And that is more than likely going to be a reason why they would feel they have to make a change during the season on the manager. Now, a lot of the Tottenham fans are wondering why maybe they've not made a change sooner. They're all calling for it, and I think they've been a bit impatient with it maybe, but, I'm not a Tottenham supporter. How they feel is how they feel about the situation. But looking from my outside perspective, I feel like they should be more patient. I don't think the performance has been that terrible. And they just signed Conor Gallagher. They have a good squad as well. I just don't think they're working, they're not all singing from the same hymn sheet, as you could say. I think there's obviously a lot of improvements that they could have, and losing to West Ham in the last minute is heartbreaking for them, especially at home. That's not great. That's not great for anybody. Losing a derby at home in the last minute is probably one of the worst things that can happen in the season. But I do think there's a lot of potential with that team. Yes, they need signings. Yes, they need more players. But again, they're missing James Maddison. They missed Solanke for most of the season. Two really key players. Javi Simmons has flattered to deceive a little bit. He's not been great, but his performances have improved a little bit at least. And I think overall, they're definitely missing that spark. They're definitely missing that little extra bit of sort of, spark that would probably propel them back into the upper echelons of the league. That bit of extra quality. Again, is that the manager's fault? I think sometimes once you've gone round the houses with your managers, it isn't always the manager's fault. And I think they've got a good manager. He's got a great track record. And I think given time, Thomas Frank would get it right. But I do think, look, they're probably more than likely going to pull the trigger. And I imagine if they maybe don't win this game this week in the Champions League, who have they got actually? So let's have a look. So Champions League. So they've got Dortmund. Dortmund have been in great form. If they don't win that game against Dortmund today at time of recording, I could see him potentially being, let go at some point in the next week. Maybe he won't. Maybe they'll stick with him. If I was them, I would potentially look to stick with the guy. I think he's a great manager. I just think he needs more time. That Tottenham team was in a state when he came in. So trying to correct all that in one season is, nigh on impossible. It's going to take time. It's going to take a lot of, effort. It's going to take a lot of, probably a lot of down moments to then get to the up moments. But we'll see, again, who are they going to bring in if they do sack him? I think that's the big question most Tottenham fans should ask themselves is who's actually available, who would come to Tottenham? There isn't that many options at the moment. Unless you're going to pay big money for one of these star sort of, managers out there. Xabi Alonso's just obviously out of work. You've got Enzo Maresca, but would they really go for him after his, being the manager at Chelsea? I highly doubt it. Xabi Alonso, don't see him going there. I imagine he'll probably bide his time, maybe look at what the situation is in the summer regarding teams around Europe. So who would they get in? I don't know. And do they really want to go with a caretaker manager till the end of the season? Probably not. So, and there's a lot of thought there for Tottenham and a lot of things that they could do to maybe correct what's going on. But options are limited and time is running out. So we'll see. Again, my opinion, I'd stick with Thomas Frank till the end of the season and see how you get on. I don't think you're going to get relegated. I know they're only, how many points away from the relegation? Well, they're 10 points away from the relegation zone, so they don't need to worry about that, which is mental to think about talking like that about Tottenham. But their goal is obviously to get to Europe. They're only, if we look, let's say 8th, they're only 6 points away from Newcastle in 8th at the moment and Sunderland in 9th, who are joint 8th, and 33 points. So I don't see a reason why they can't bridge that gap by the end of the season. Every team is beating each other, and I have a theory that there's been more draws this year than there has been in other Premier League seasons. I haven't got the exact statistics, but my feeling is there's been more draws this season. Everybody's taking points of everybody. The only team that are running away with anything are Arsenal at the top, really, and even they're not doing great recently. 2 draws in a row. So I do think there's a chance for them to still make Europe, but obviously, things need to change sooner rather than later. Time is running out still. We've played 22 games now. There's only 16 games left. Things need to change soon. I do see, though, light at the end of the tunnel. Now, to finish off, just kind of having a look at sort of Arsenal running away with the league at the top with 50 points. Now a 7-point gap between City and Aston Villa. 2 draws in a row, though. And that Nottingham Forest game was a bit of a dross game, to be fair. And I think it shows that, look, Their defence is going to get them over the line in these scenarios when their attack isn't doing very well. That's why you build off a great defence like they have done. Do I see them wobbling at this point on? Look, I don't think they're going to continue this great form that they've had. They've won 15 games out of 22 so far. I do see more draws coming into it. Do I see them losing many more games? Probably not. And even if they do lose a couple more games, do I really see Man City going undefeated now till the end of the season? Probably not. City went on a 16-game run a couple of years ago to win the title. Do I see this Man City team being able to, do that? No. So I do think they're probably nailed on for the league now, unless there's an almighty collapse. If they somehow collapse this, it is the biggest collapse in history of football, in the Premier League at least anyway, because they are so, in theory, when you watch them, defensively, they are levels above anybody else in the league. Attacking wise, they do enough to get over the line. I don't think that their players, their forward players are as good as people make out. I think they are very much propped up by their defence and the likes of Rice and Zupimendi. Saka's been very poor this season. I don't care what anyone says, in my opinion, Saka's been very poor this season. His numbers sometimes don't lie, and the eye test doesn't lie. He's not been great. Trossard does bag a few goals, but isn't consistent. Martinelli, non-existent. Gyökeres, what's he really offering? I know he scored in the week against Chelsea, but is he really offering you a lot? Not really. So there is so much improvement that they could still make that would probably mean that they absolutely run away with it at a canter after about 30 games. But it's like they're letting the likes of City and even Villa, to be fair, hold on for dear life. Again, I don't see them not winning it. I see they're going to probably run away with it. I see their lead at the top of the table probably increasing more than decreasing. But do I think they're going to be this, as good as they were maybe the first third of the season? No. I think they will drop off again. I just don't think it's going to be as monumental as we've seen in the past from Arsenal teams, where they completely, disintegrate in front of our eyes and, completely mess up everything that they've done so well to build. And even if they did, I don't think the teams around them are good enough to be able to capitalise on it as well. So it's a bit of a disappointing sort of thought process for the other teams in leagues that are chasing pack of City and Villa. Liverpool, I think they're way too far behind now. I don't think they're even worried about, trying to get the title. They've had 4 draws in a row. I think Arsenal, are defo poised to just go on a run now, just absolutely blitz it and, get to the end of the season at a canter. It is what it is. But my opinion is, even if they were to sort of falter and mess up, I don't think the teams around them are good enough to sort of capitalise at the moment. And I think that's basically built off their amazing defence. I don't think their attack is great, but I think the defence is, absolutely incredible. So that's the Premier League roundup. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, drop a like, I'd love a subscribe as well. And, if you have any sort of topic points I maybe missed or any comments on basically what I've said, comment in the comment section down below. Love to sort of have, comments down there and, communicate with people. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week on the next Premier League roundup. Peace.